Kyoshi might have learned the secret to immortality. Avatar Yang Chen lived 60 years, Kuruk only 33, Roku 70, but Kyoshi somehow managed to live over 2 centuries, dying at 230 years old, far longer than the average, well, mortal person in Avatar. And the novels, my friends, might hold the answer. And today's video is sponsored by my Patreon. If you like my content, then please consider going over and subscribing there for any amount you feel you can. I have been fortunate enough to be doing this for 7 years now, and it is purely because of the amazing support that those people do over on Patreon. Truly, genuinely, it's mind-boggling. We have a Discord and a monthly writing workshop if that interests you, but if you can't, that's totally okay. I would love for you to go check out my short stories published in magazines. There's a ton of them linked down below, most of which I think are free to read now, like 2 Robots at the End of the World, which has just been selected for the 5-year Best of Utopian Anthology. Links all down below. Writing is my life, and I want to share that with you. Alright, so in this book, Kyoshi is trained by a mysterious old dude named Lao G. He appears as a drunk, foolish bandit, but this is a facade. In reality, he's an immortal assassin who has pulled strings throughout the Earth Kingdom for centuries, even murdering the Earth King once before, and he's otherwise known as Tegwai. And I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it, I only read it on the page, so feel free to correct me. Lao G is already old, but he hints at his true age a lot, measured not in decades, but centuries, or even millennia, implying that he even personally knew Guru Shokin, an ancient philosopher, which would put him at over 4,000 years old, before the Four Nations had even formed. Now, we don't know that he's telling the truth, but 1, nobody remembers him as anything but already old, and 2, he has the skills to back up this backstory. And as a note, this is just one of the things that the books do really well in fleshing out the story of Avatar in a really natural way. But when Kyoshi finally bites and asked how Lao Gi achieved immortality, he tells her the following, and pay attention to the wording. You see, it all comes down to order, keeping things neat, clean, and tidy. Aging is really just your body falling apart on the smallest, most invisible levels and neglecting to put itself back together. With the right mental focus, you could take an inventory of your own body and place each little piece that's not where it should be back into the correct order. Basically stopping his body from decaying with what he calls the right mental focus. So one way to look at this is that the right mental focus is just sheer willpower, and Kyoshi just refused to die, which I would totally believe. I don't think we would put that past her. But this idea of spiritual and physical mastery over your body extending your lifespan has appeared in Avatar before. Guru Patik is one of the oldest characters in the series, at over 120 years old, and having personally known monk Gyatso. And in a way, we see how Patik achieved this. He has acquired what could be called perfect mental focus. He's opened all of his chakras, he meditates in tandem with the universe, he's kept his body strong, flexible, limber, fit, he's able to ignore his hunger and feel satisfied on little more than banana juice, despite being over a century old. We see how the chakras are tied to physical points on the body, and opening them is about exercising full control over your body and mind. That spiritual mastery becomes mastery over the body, and perhaps lets him see those invisible ways the body neglects itself, even passively, even if he doesn't quite notice it. And perhaps, like Lao Gi, he was able to use that control to put each piece back in the correct order. That Guru Patik was stopping himself from decaying, even if he didn't necessarily realize it. And the creators actually acknowledged a similar thing with a different character, King Bumi, the second oldest character at around 112 years old. You know, Bumi lived over 100 years. We had kind of set it up. Pretty early on, Mike and I were of the idea that these people with such enhanced chi fields might live a longer time. We've shown that Kyoshi was a pretty robust person. So there's the second term, the right mental focus and enhanced chi fields. This is the first lore reason we were ever given that Kyoshi lived for such a long time, and as far as I can tell, it hasn't been used really anywhere else, but we were given it over a decade ago, and it fits with what Lao G was saying. In Avatar, chi is the life force you have that connects you to the world around you, and perhaps the right mental focus isn't all that different from manipulating your chi. You know, we see that with Guru Patik too. His whole thing was helping Aang's chi flow naturally, allowing him to control the flow of his chi completely, unchecked, so that you could access the avatar state. Being a powerful bender isn't just about raw talent, it's about your ability to manipulate your chi. If this kind of skill, spirituality, and practice gives you enhanced chi fields, then maybe Kyoshi used hers, like Patik, like Lao Gi, to prevent her body from decaying. And the idea of spiritual or martial mastery leading to a kind of immortality isn't entirely without basis in our world. The legendary Chinese Taoist figures Zhang Sangfen supposedly achieved immortality by mastering what they called internal cultivation, controlling perhaps how the chi flowed throughout his body, his breathing, his muscles, turning his martial arts into something that gave him perfect control over his body, prolonging his life with what sounds pretty damn similar to everything we've been describing with King Bumi or Guru Patik, Lao Gi, and Kyoshi. And not only this, but Mike and Brian referenced these sort of legendary characters in discussing Kyoshi over a decade ago. But there is a dark side to immortality. Because of course there is. There always is. Because Kyoshi goes on to say this. The way you describe it, you'd have to decide what version of yourself you'd be stuck as, forever. Exactly. Those who grow, live, and die. The stagnant pool is immortal, while the clear flowing river dies an uncountable number of deaths. I'm trying to teach you about the mind, an infinite world that's been neglected by far too many explorers. Becoming immortal is becoming a stagnant pool, sickly, putrid, unable to be clean of itself, but eternal. In one way, Kyoshi's just talking about physical appearance. You just have to choose what you look like, but it's probably psychological as well. Lao Gi talks about growing and changing with a gravitas that applies more to who you are as a person than it does to your physical appearance, even explicitly saying he's talking about the mind, your beliefs, your personality, who you are. You stagnate as a person. To be immortal is to crystallize yourself, but it stops you evolving as a person too, stuck in your ways, stubborn, even self-righteous. And Lao Gi in the books is exactly that. He lives by an unbreakable moral code. He is undeterrable, unswayable, stubborn, and frustrating. He has been doing the same thing for thousands of years, and his mind cannot be changed. And not just because he's hard to convince, but because perhaps he can't change his mind. The term stagnation applies much more to the way a person lives and thinks than to how they look. We don't consider old people to be stagnating. And if all of this sounds familiar, it's because, yeah, it is. Kyoshi too has that undeterrable moral streak to her, her inflexible sense of justice that she cannot be persuaded one way or the other when she speaks to Aang or the like. Perhaps she extended her own lifespan to 230 years and that came with a little stagnation. We don't know. We're never given any confirmation, not in these books. But what do you think that would have looked like with her? Interestingly, we only ever see Kyoshi when she's middle-aged, meaning she might have started using this technique when she was younger. And when she died, she still looked in her 30s or 40s, like Lao Gi just looked like an older man. However, there was one curious line in this book that actually suggests that this technique is an earthbending specific ability. And it's curious because, well, who guessed it? All the people we've been discussing today, Bumi, Kyoshi, Lao Gi, possibly even Patik, they're all Earth Kingdom. But more than that, Lao Gi's stagnation could be connected with what Bumi himself described as neutral Jin, the ability to wait, to decide when to attack, to not move, to not shift or change and stay as you are. Bumi is a master of neutral Jin himself. It's a very earth-bending focused thing. And perhaps it's not just to do with bending and combat, but it's more spiritual, physical. It has broader implications than that. Truly mastering it might lead to immortality. Of course, the weird thing is, Lao G's description of how the body decays and dies isn't actually that far off from reality. You know, we age because our body loses its ability to heal and replicate and adapt, and all the things slowly, invisibly start to fall out of place and don't go where they're meant to be. Now look, you know I've always hated the idea of like, is flesh bending possible because everything's made of carbon and earthbenders should be able to bend flesh like they bend soil. I hate it. I hate it. Or there's iron in the blood, so metal benders, blah, blah, blah. No, not doing it. But still, worth mentioning. It's not like there's no connection between bending and reality. However, there is another reason, the true reason that Kyoshi lived so long. The creators made a mistake. See, in the 4th episode of the 1st season, they offhandedly had the mayor of Kyoshi Island give us this line.
Avatar Kyoshi was born here 400 years ago.
But because Aang had to be in the ice for 100 years, and Roku needed to be born around the same time as Fire Lord Sozin for them to be friends, there's a whole episode dedicated to that, this meant that Kyoshi somehow lived for over 200 years, and they didn't really have a way out of that. So, they made up a cool answer, and I like that. I love when this sort of stuff happens. You know, we like to imagine that world building and writing it's all perfectly interconnected, and people don't just make up things on the fly to retroactively make things make sense. But sometimes that is the way it is, and it can give us really great answers, and it can give us really crappy answers too. But I happen to like this one. It just really fits with her character. Now the last question is, of course, if Kyoshi was immortal, how did she die? Well, we don't know, but being immortal does not make you immune to an 8d6 fireball to the face, so something might have killed her, but I would put money on the idea that Kyoshi wasn't killed by anyone, not someone this powerful, this awesome, but instead, she chose to die. She gets to a point where she's realized that she has stagnated, she has seen enough of the world, and it is time to move on, to let someone else take over the role of Avatar. Her time has come, and she will meet death on her terms. I think that would be a great end to her story. But that's all from me. Just a fun little video. I know I haven't done a little Avatar thing in a while, but it's a lot of fun to come back to, you know, and just do this stuff, especially with the new Netflix series coming out. I'm going to be talking about that, don't worry. I'll be doing like episode by episode reviews over on the 2nd channel, probably. In the meantime, Patreon, of course, thank you so much if you do, it means a hell of a lot, and you know, especially if you want to support my writing, world building content, that sort of thing. And go check out my short stories, they mean a lot to me and I want to share them with you, and I'm going to have some pretty exciting news in a little while, I think. But stay nerdy, and I'll see you in the future.